I knew something was wrong the morning I walked into the data center and found my desk plant drooping over like it had given up on life. I hadn't watered it in a week, but somehow it still managed to die under LED lights and a wall of corporate motivational posters. That was pretty much what it felt like working at Strategized Systems lately. Slow, polite suffocation under someone else's spotlight. My name's Lauren Pierce, Senior Software Engineer. I'd been with the company for 6 years, and for the last 8 months, I'd practically been living inside my code, building a predictive logistics engine that could trim millions from our clients' supply chain costs. Not exactly the kind of thing you brag about at a cocktail party, but in the world of enterprise logistics, that kind of optimization gets investors foaming like it's a Vegas jackpot. I was the one who came up with the dynamic recalibration layer, the model that adjusted lead times automatically based on live data from global vendors. I was also the one who restructured the heuristic core after our polished, perpetually tanned CTO, Damon Langford, called my model too technical for the demo. He had a talent for making brilliant things sound simple, which in his language meant, mine now. I let it slide because you learn early that being the quiet genius in the room is about choosing your battles. But then came the Tuesday stand-up. Damon stood at the whiteboard, grinning like a man who'd just discovered gravity. He called it our team's breakthrough. The flowchart behind him? Mine, every line, every pixel. The interns nodded. The VP smiled. I sipped my coffee and wondered if caffeine could kill shame. After the meeting, one of the interns, Lexi, leaned over and asked, "Hey, are you going to be listed on the patent?" I blinked, confused. The patent? She looked at me like I'd asked her what day it was. Well, yeah. You built it, didn't you? That question echoed through my brain long after she walked away. I had assumed, stupidly, that of course I'd be listed. Why wouldn't I be? Then, 2 weeks later, I caught the first real red flag buried in an IT support log. It was a change request restricting access to the patent documentation directory. Access now limited to legal, Damon, and 2 junior devs I barely knew. When I tried to open the folder out of curiosity, it was gone. No warning, no error message. Just gone. I asked Damon about it during a coffee break. He gave me that half-laugh, half-smirk he'd perfected. Oh, that folder thing? Legal's tightening permissions ahead of the investor launch. Don't worry, Lauren. Everything's been filed under the right names. I smiled back, but inside, something tightened. That man could lie smoother than a late-night infomercial. The next week, I overheard one of the execs in the hallway whisper, "Glad we cleaned up the IP before the board review." That phrase, "cleaned up the IP," hit me like a cold slap. From that day, I stopped assuming. I started documenting. I kept private copies of my code with timestamps, exported Git logs, backed up Slack threads where Damon explicitly told me to simplify the logic because sales doesn't need to understand it. I even printed emails because paper has a funny way of surviving when files mysteriously vanish. Still, I kept showing up, smiling in meetings, clapping when Damon demoed my architecture to the board. Because here's what I'd learned. Let a man like Damon think he's won, and he'll write his own downfall in ink. By month 5, the hype around our upcoming product launch was peaking. Champagne orders, press invites, and a company blog post titled, "Young Innovators Driving the Future of Automation." The kid they featured? One of Damon's pet junior devs, the same one who once asked me how to install a Python library without crashing his OS. But I waited, because the most dangerous person in a corporate room isn't the loudest one. It's the one quietly taking notes. Then, one Tuesday at 9:17 a.m., I got an email. Team-wide permissions update. Routine. I clicked the folder link out of habit. Access denied. No prompt. No explanation. Just silence. Surgical and deliberate. That was the day I realized I wasn't being overlooked anymore. I was being erased. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, the blue glow making the room feel colder than it was. The words "access denied" kept looping in my head like a broken notification. I wasn't paranoid. I was precise. Damon had cut me out, and he'd done it cleanly. But he didn't know me as well as he thought. I opened my private backup, an encrypted drive I'd started keeping after he accidentally deleted my branch history during a code merge. He'd blamed Git for the glitch, saying, "Software gets moody sometimes." Sure, and I'm the tooth fairy. Ever since then, I kept my own records, off-site, offline, and time-stamped down to the second. On that drive were the original builds, my annotation trail, versioned commits, every proof of authorship I'd ever need. The next morning, I played it cool. I stopped by Damon's desk with a coffee, my best office-friendly smile on. "Hey," I said, "did legal finish the provisional patent filing?" He didn't look up from his monitor. "Yep, all the right names, all squared away." "You're good." That phrase again, all the right names. He finally looked up, his eyes flickering for half a second before he grinned. "You know how legal gets before a launch. Overkill mode." Overkill? Right. The same mode that conveniently stripped my access to everything tied to my invention. I walked away smiling, but inside, I was already rearranging the battlefield. Damon might have been upstairs, but I was the one who built the walls. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing Lexi's question. "Are you going to be on the patent?" It wasn't innocent. It was a flare I'd ignored. The next day, I took my lunch outside to the terrace where the senior execs liked to casually brainstorm. I sat close enough to overhear. Two VPs were laughing about bonuses when one said, "Glad we cleaned up the IP before the board got involved." The other replied, "You mean before Damon's girl figured it out?" I froze. Damon's girl. Not his engineer, not his architect. His girl. I packed up my sandwich, walked straight to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and sat in the dark for 20 minutes. My pulse was a drumbeat of clarity. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being erased on purpose. When I came out, I started backing up everything. Emails, code snapshots, Slack threads, even rejected drafts I'd saved in random folders. I wasn't hoarding. I was preserving a crime scene. Then I opened Slack and started combing through conversations. I saved the subtle ones, the patronizing "maybe simplify this" comments, the "great work. I'll polish it for the pitch notes." The digital fingerprints of Damon's theft were everywhere. By Thursday, the office felt different. People spoke quieter. The juniors avoided eye contact. HR stopped by my desk to check in and asked how I was adjusting to the new team structure. New team structure? That was news to me. I smiled, said just fine, and closed my laptop. They thought I was folding. I was loading ammo. That evening, I reached out to someone who might actually know the rules of this game, Ava Moreno, one of our in-house counsels. We weren't close, but she'd always treated engineers like humans, not cogs. I messaged her, "Coffee sometime? Need a sanity check on something patent-related." She replied in under a minute. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m., Neutral Grounds Cafe." I didn't sleep much that night either. My mind kept replaying Damon's smirk, his fake friendly tone, the easy lies. But this time, I wasn't spiraling. I was cataloging. I printed the key documents, Git logs, internal tickets, Slack screenshots, each tagged with a unique checksum hash. The next day, I showed up to Neutral Grounds early. It smelled like burnt espresso and quiet confessions. When Ava arrived, crisp blazer, hair up, legal pad tucked under one arm, I exhaled for the first time all week. We talked small for a few minutes, her dog's surgery, my neighbor's drone hobby, before I leaned in. "So, how's it going with the patent filings?" "Must be chaos with the launch coming." She blinked. "Which filing?" I hesitated. "The predictive routing engine." Damon said it was already filed. Her smile faltered. Wait, you mean the Strategen patent? You're listed as an author, right? I just stared. No, I said. I'm not. Ava's face changed. Subtle, professional, but unmistakably alarmed. That was the moment paranoia turned into proof. Ava didn't try to soften it. She leaned back slowly, her brows drawn, then reached for her phone. That doesn't make sense, she murmured, scrolling through something on her screen. When I reviewed the preliminary drafts last quarter, your name was all over the dev notes. Damon told us final versions would be routed through you for confirmation. Her voice trailed off, realization dawning. Oh, she whispered, that small, sharp syllable that makes your stomach drop. I sat there staring at her, the sounds of coffee cups and laptop clicks fading into static. Can I ask when it was filed? I finally said, keeping my tone steady. Ava lowered her voice. 2 months ago, right after the internal audit. Damon pushed it through fast, said it needed to be cleaned for investor review. There were red lines on your contribution logs, but I thought they were consolidating, not erasing. There it was again. Clean. The corporate euphemism for theft with good lighting. I smiled thinly. Do you still have access? She hesitated. Technically, no, but discreetly? She gave a half shrug. Translation? Yes. I nodded, finished my coffee, and stood. Thanks, Ava. Really. As we walked out, she touched my arm. Lauren, be careful. I smiled back. That's been my mistake. I've been careful. I walked home the long way, past the sushi bar, where Damon once pitched me a lifetime opportunity, past the mural, where interns took selfies during happy hour. I thought about the months I'd spent building something elegant, only to have it hijacked by a man who saw brilliance as a mirror for his ego. But I wasn't going to be erased quietly. That night, I sat at my desk with a cup of black coffee and opened every version of my work. I compared file timestamps, commit histories, internal backups. I mapped my code across development branches like a detective building a crime board. I wasn't angry. I was deliberate. I annotated every proof of authorship, recorded the dates, hashed the files, exported the evidence 3 ways. Then I printed them all, page by page, the sound of the printer marking each small victory. By dawn, I had a paper trail that could survive a nuclear event. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had happened. Damon was in the conference room giving his daily sermon about vision and agility. When he mentioned my name, Lauren's been integral to our early architecture, but we've streamlined the logic to make it more scalable. I felt the words roll over me like static. Streamlined meant stolen, scalable meant mine now. I smiled anyway. Let him talk. Let him tighten the rope. That afternoon, HR emailed me. Quick alignment chat. Clarify your current responsibilities. I showed up to a small meeting room with Melanie, our HR manager, all smiles and clipboard. We just want to make sure your focus aligns with launch priorities, she said. Damon mentioned you might be stepping back from core feature work, more documentation, mentorship, that sort of thing. I didn't blink. Funny, I said. Didn't realize I was stepping back. Her eyes darted to her notes. Maybe I misunderstood. No, she hadn't. She just didn't want to admit it. I walked out smiling, heart pounding but mind clear. They were repositioning me for the fall. So I changed my approach. That evening, I stayed late, not to code, but to investigate. The office was quiet, the hum of servers like distant thunder. I'd gotten a tip from Ava earlier that week. Check internal print logs. Sometimes legal runs physical copies before final filings. I found the printer room dark, cold, and quiet. Inside the discard tray were pages of test prints, half-tone charts, and in the middle, there it was. A printout labeled Strategian Provisional Patent Draft v3.pdf. My stomach dropped. I flipped through the pages. Core routing logic, system architecture, annotated exactly like my builds, but labeled Author D. Langford, Damon's name, his initials, my work. My hands shook once, then steadied. I folded the document carefully, slid it into my bag, and left the room. No drama, no noise, just precision. At my desk, I scanned the document, logged the timestamp, cross-checked the printer metadata, and saved it to 3 secure locations: an encrypted drive, a private cloud, and a dormant email I'd made in grad school. I even ran a checksum hash, immutable proof that it came from Strategen's own network. Damon had stolen my code and filed it under his name. But now, I had his fingerprints all over the weapon. From that moment, my life became a quiet, methodical operation. Every conversation, every Slack message, every offhand remark from Damon, I logged it all. I created an encrypted folder labeled innocuously as travel receipts and stored copies of everything: meeting invites, version histories, document headers, and metadata trails. I even set up an Outlook rule that automatically forwarded any email containing keywords like patent, equity, or Series C to a hidden archive. Damon thought he was the architect of control, but I'd been mapping the blueprints long before he realized the house was on fire. A few days later, he caught me by the vending machines, pretending to be casual. "Hey," he said, flashing that teeth-gritted grin he used for investor calls. "You've been really focused lately." "Good to see." I smiled. "Just staying in my lane?" He laughed. "Come on, Lauren. You've always been more than that." I met his eyes just long enough for him to see it, the flicker of something sharp under calm waters. "I used to think so," I said, then walked away. That's when the quiet war began. Corporate warfare doesn't start with shouting. It starts with subtlety: calendar exclusions, threads that vanish, decisions that get finalized without you. My meeting invites began to dry up. My access to project dashboards disappeared. My name was omitted from summaries. By week 7, I wasn't just off the radar. I was off the map. Damon and his 2 junior engineers, Adam and Emily, were now leading his engine. The same engine I'd designed, written, debugged, and tested. I watched from a distance as Damon repackaged my architecture into buzzwords and recycled jargon, pitching it as if divine inspiration had struck him during a mindfulness retreat. He was so busy perfecting his narrative that he didn't notice the quiet compliance trail forming behind him. I decided it was time to talk to Carla Rhodes, the head of compliance. Most engineers avoided her. Compliance was the department you called when something broke publicly. But I'd worked with Carla years ago when Strategen was still small enough for engineers and compliance to share coffee machines. She was sharp, methodical, allergic to bullshit. I sent her a message on Slack. "Hey, Carla, got a few risk points I'd like your perspective on, tied to how the logistics engine's being represented in investor materials." Her reply was quick. "Come by this afternoon." Her office was tucked behind a glass wall, full of binders labeled like crime exhibits. She looked up as I entered, 3 monitors glowing in the reflection of her glasses. "Lauren. Been a while?" "Yeah," I said, laying a folder on her desk. "I think there might be inconsistencies in how certain authorship data is being reported internally versus externally." She raised an eyebrow. "You mean the patent?" My pulse kicked. "So you've seen it?" Damon flagged it to legal last month. Called it urgent. "Right," I said smoothly. "Just wanted to double-check the ownership attributions. There's some overlap in contributions, and I wanted to make sure we're audit-ready if the board or investors ask questions." Carla leaned back, scanning my folder. Inside were carefully curated samples: Slack messages, Jira assignments reassigned at the last minute. Commit logs showing Damon's so-called authorship appeared only after my original commits. None of it screamed fraud individually, but together, it whispered loud enough for her to hear. "You've got your logs backed up somewhere safe?" she asked. "Backups of backups," I said. "Good," she nodded. "You want this escalated?" "Not yet, just logged for now." She gave a knowing nod. Understood. I trusted her silence more than anyone's promise. As I left, I sent her a short recap email with the subject line: Product risk, authorship clarification threads. It was polite, neutral, and time-stamped, just enough to survive discovery. That evening, the office buzzed louder than usual. Damon was entertaining a Series C investor, a tall man in a gray suit who laughed too loudly and didn't bother learning names. They were standing by the main monitor, Damon gesturing proudly at my dashboard. I stopped just close enough to hear him say, "Lauren's been stepping back, refocusing on mentorship. She's burned out." I didn't stop walking. I didn't even look back. But my blood turned cold. Damon had rewritten the story again, this time painting my absence as weakness. My phone buzzed just then, a single line from Ava. "Meet me before the launch party." No emojis, no context. Just a warning wrapped in 7 words. I stared at it for a long time, my reflection ghosting over the screen. Whatever she'd found, it wasn't small. This wasn't the next move. It was the endgame starting to breathe. The sky that evening was a strange shade of orange, too bright for sunset, too dim for daylight. The kind of color that makes everything feel staged, like the world's holding its breath. I sat at a corner table in a coffee shop that smelled like burnt cinnamon and printer ink, waiting for Ava. She arrived fast, hair in a loose bun, legal folder tucked under her arm, expression sharper than usual. No small talk, no wave, no fake smile. She just slid into the booth, set the folder down, and opened it with the precision of a surgeon. "You were right," she said quietly. "He filed it without you." My stomach clenched. She flipped through the pages, laying them between us like evidence at a trial. The patent header glared back at me. Predictive Logistics Routing System, Strategized Systems Inc. and under authors and contributors, Damon Langford, Adam Patel, Emily Cho. My name wasn't missing. It had never been there. I scanned the page, hands steady only because they had to be. "He forged my signature," I said, voice flat. Ava nodded. "He backdated a draft to make it look like you reviewed it months ago. I verified the signature hash. It doesn't match the one on file." She hesitated, watching my face. "Lauren, this wasn't an accident. He scrubbed your name intentionally." I leaned back slowly, air cutting sharp through my lungs. It all aligned now, the folder access being revoked, the legal policy changes, the red lines in the logs, HR's fake concern. They weren't random moments. They were steps in a plan, a cover-up built layer by layer while I kept coding. "He did it before the investor push," Ava continued. "Timing's not a coincidence. With your name off the filing, he claims full authorship. That means he gets the equity clause bonus when the patent's monetized. And you get a thank you mug and a smaller raise." I finished. The bitterness hit like old coffee. Ava closed the folder gently. "What do you want to do?" I stared out the window. A delivery truck passed, painted with our company logo, the engine I built powering the logistics of half the western seaboard. "I'm not sure yet," I said slowly. "But I'm done playing defense." I told her everything. About my backups, the Git logs, the Slack exports, the printer document, the checksum hashes that linked Damon's edits to my original code. I showed her the digital certificates verifying file creation dates, The recorded meeting where he claimed authorship in front of witnesses. Ava didn't interrupt. She just listened, absorbing every word like a deposition. When I finished, she pulled out her phone, typed something, then set it face down. "General Counsel's getting this," she said quietly. "Off calendar. Are you sure?" "Positive. She's old school. She won't tolerate falsified filings under her name." I nodded. Then I guess we're past the point of subtlety. Ava studied me for a moment. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but clarity feels better than fear." We sat in silence for a while, watching people move outside. Engineers in hoodies, interns with conference badges, executives pretending they weren't checking Slack on their phones. Every one of them part of a company built on a stolen invention. When we stood to leave, Ava paused. "Launch party's in 3 days." "I know. You're going?" I zipped my jacket. Wouldn't miss it. Because if Damon was going to stand on stage and sell my creation to the world, I was going to be there when the story rewrote itself. The night of the launch felt like the beginning of a movie I'd already seen too many times. The ballroom shimmered with gold accents, LED uplighting, and just enough champagne to make everyone forget it was built on fraud. The phrase, "Strategized Logistics Engine, launching the future," scrolled across 3 massive screens. My engine, his branding. I arrived exactly 48 minutes late, long enough for the speeches to start, short enough to end them. Damon stood on stage, mic in hand, charisma dripping like oil. "Innovation," he was saying, "isn't a solo act. It's a chorus." Of course it was. He smiled too wide, scanning the crowd. His gaze found me, and for a split second, his grin cracked. Then, across the room, I saw Ava. She wasn't drinking, wasn't mingling. She was watching, her team at her side, phones ready. Something was about to break, and this time, it wouldn't be me. The air in the ballroom hummed with polished nerves and over-rehearsed excitement. Reporters clustered near the champagne pyramid, cameras flashing in intervals. Board members lingered in small circles, murmuring about valuations and scalability like it was scripture. I stayed near the back bar, glass in hand, letting the noise wash over me. Damon was at the center of it all, radiant under the lights, soaking in the applause like it was oxygen. He raised his glass mid-speech, voice booming through the mic. And none of this would have been possible without the brilliance of our team, especially Adam and Emily, our rising innovators. The crowd clapped. The 2 juniors stood awkwardly, smiling with that nervous pride of people too new to know they were pawns. I clapped too, slow and polite. Damon caught sight of me again, a flicker of something uncertain flashing in his eyes before he masked it with a grin. He lifted his glass slightly in my direction. I returned the gesture, cool, unblinking, the ghost he didn't expect to see tonight. Ava was across the room, expression unreadable. The compliance team stood like sentinels, one of them holding a phone angled at Damon just so, like they were taking a photo, but I knew better. Damon wrapped up his speech with a practiced humility that made my skin crawl. "Innovation is about trust," he said, "about collaboration." He smiled, and about accountability. That last word landed heavier than he realized. The jazz trio started again, people drifted toward the buffet, and the chatter resumed. Damon descended the stage, shaking hands, laughing too loud. Then he spotted me again and made a beeline through the crowd. "Didn't think you'd come," he said, voice warm but strained. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, sipping my drink. "Big night for you. Big night for us," he corrected, forcing a chuckle. "Hope you're doing okay?" The last few weeks were intense. That's one word for it. He lowered his voice. "Look, about the filing stuff, no hard feelings, right? It was just confusion during the process. Legal gets messy before launches." "Confusion," I repeated. "That's what we're calling forgery now?" His smile wavered. "Lauren, let's not do this here. Tonight's supposed to be celebratory. You're right, I said, matching his tone. You're the star. Wouldn't want to disturb the narrative. He exhaled, trying to stay composed. Let's keep things professional. Of course, I said, eyes locked on his. Wouldn't want to ruin the performance. He blinked, unsure if I meant the event or his act. Before he could reply, a voice cut clean through the noise. A woman's voice, cool and unmistakable. Wait, it said, clear as glass. Then who signed it? Silence dropped across the room like a curtain. I didn't have to turn around. I knew it was Marion Clark, Strategized's general counsel. She stood a few feet away, flanked by 2 compliance officers, Ava just behind her. Every conversation froze mid-sentence. Damon turned slowly, the smile on his face disintegrating. Excuse me? He said, the word brittle. Marion didn't blink. You said the patent was filed with all contributors accounted for. That includes Lauren, correct? Damon's jaw flexed. Of course, he stammered. There must have been some version control issue. The phrase landed like a weak card in a rigged deck. I tilted my head slightly, my voice calm but cutting through the silence. That's odd. The version you filed mirrors my internal builds line by line. You could feel the oxygen leaving the room. Even the bartender froze mid-wipe. The board advisor, Charles Monroe, stepped closer, eyes sharp. He didn't say a word, just watched. Marion's tone didn't change. Damon? She said softly, we need to talk. Right now. He tried to laugh, the sound strangled. Marion, this isn't the time. No, she interrupted. It's the only time. Ava moved forward then, phone in hand, its red light blinking. We've reviewed the filing, she said evenly. There are inconsistencies between the listed authors and the development logs. Significant ones. Someone near the buffet let out a low whistle. Cameras clicked. The crowd parted like water, leaving Damon alone in a circle of scrutiny. His hand tightened on his drink, knuckles white. We should step into a side room, Marion said again. Not a suggestion, but a verdict. Damon opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence stretched, heavy and electric. When his eyes finally met mine, there was no arrogance left, just the dawning horror of a man realizing the story had flipped mid-sentence. I smiled, not cruelly, just quietly certain. Then I stepped aside so they could walk him out of his own party. They escorted Damon out through the side doors, past the champagne towers, past the stunned interns, past the 3 glowing screens that still looped his name beneath my invention. The music stumbled, then died entirely, leaving only the sound of his footsteps and the soft scrape of Marion's heels beside him. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then someone clinked a glass nervously, and conversation sputtered back to life. Too loud, too forced, like everyone was trying to convince themselves it hadn't just happened. I stayed where I was, my pulse steady, the air strangely lighter now. I took another sip of my champagne. It was warm, flat, but it tasted like justice. Within 48 hours, the company went into lockdown mode. Legal sent out a system-wide notice. Internal audit, immediate compliance required. The email didn't include details, but it didn't have to. Everyone knew. The whispers spread faster than any memo ever could. By the next morning, Damon's name had vanished from the Slack directory. His office was dark, badge access revoked. Adam and Emily didn't come in that day, or the next. Rumor said they'd been called into early morning meetings with legal and never returned to their desks. The once noisy floor felt like a paused video, everyone moving slower, whispering shorter. The ping-pong table sat unused, the break room laughter replaced by the quiet hum of printers and the occasional nervous cough. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The audit team traced everything: commit histories, Slack archives, Git logs, metadata trails. My timestamps were immutable. My original versions predated the patent filing by months. Damon's revisions, all labeled with his author tag, had been made within a 72-hour window, right before the submission date. The icing on the cake was the signature. The one on the patent didn't match the one legal had on file for me. Marion's team ran a hash comparison. The result? Forged. Sloppy, too. Pulled from a year-old NDA and digitally pasted into the filing. And then came the confession. Poor Adam cracked first. During the compliance interview, he admitted Damon had told him, "It's just for speed, we'll clean it up later." That phrase, "clean it up later," had haunted me for months. Turns out, it haunted him too. Within a week, the board made it official. Damon Langford, CTO of Strategized Systems, was suspended pending termination. His stock options frozen, his executive privileges revoked, and his Series C bonus nullified. The formal statement from the board read, "We take intellectual property attribution seriously," which, in corporate translation, meant, "We're cutting him out before investors smell blood." HR quietly reassigned Adam and Emily under non-disclosure agreements, and the company began restructuring the innovation division. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I just showed up, worked my hours, and kept my headphones in while the empire he'd built on stolen credit crumbled piece by piece. 2 days later, a courier arrived at my desk. A plain padded envelope, no note. Inside was a certified copy of the updated patent filing. My name was there, printed cleanly beneath Damon's, equal spacing, equal credit. No asterisk, no footnote, just fact. I ran my fingers over the ink, felt the texture, the weight of it. Then I slid it quietly into my bottom drawer, under a stack of old notebooks. No victory parade, no applause, just proof. The kind that doesn't need explaining. After that, I opened Slack, typed Damon's name into the directory, and hit delete. No confirmation screen, no warning prompt, just gone. One keystroke, one ghost erased. A few seconds later, a message popped up from Ava. Ava. Saw the directory update. Clean move. Me. Finally. Ava. Drinks tonight? I looked around the office, at the nervous smiles, the hushed tones, the faint smell of fear still lingering. Me. Rain check. Got a bug to fix. I leaned back in my chair, eyes closed for a moment, and let the silence settle. Not the awkward kind that follows conflict, the earned kind, the peace that follows truth. Outside, the sunset hit the glass walls of the office and turned everything gold for a second. My reflection stared back at me, tired, calm, still standing. No revenge speech, no victory lap. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I didn't have to shout. I'd built something real, and the right people finally saw it. The story had told itself. Old.